Eleanor Ellie Jenkins positioned herself at the imposing lectern within the onyx spire. As she steadied her trembling hand, it brushed against the delicate universal translator pinned to her jacket. A soft hum filled the crowded chamber as the device sputtered to life, then sparked erratically, corrupting her carefully rehearsed greeting into an incomprehensible barrage of distorted sounds. The room descended into an unnerving silence. Hundreds of alien gazes, some with vertically slit irises, others emitting a soft glow in the dim light, fixated on her. Behind her, the sharp intake of breath from Ambassador Sternwood resonated through the hall, nearly as jarring as the sound of the malfunctioning translator. Eleanor Ellie Jenkins had never felt more isolated than when she stood beneath the towering arches of the onyx spire. The murmurs of 100 different languages filled the air, creating a symphony of the galaxy's diversity that echoed off the iridescent walls, shimmering like oil on water. She adjusted the lapel of her jacket where her universal translator was pinned, a small but crucial piece of technology on this monumental day. "Esteemed counselors," Ellie began, her voice echoing timidly through the chamber. The translator hummed softly, vibrating against her chest. As she reached out to steady her trembling hands on the lectern, her sleeve snagged the edge of the device. A spark of static leapt from her fingers, and the translator momentarily sputtered into silence before reviving with a crackle. What should have been a warm greeting in the council's myriad native tongues turned into an unintelligible babble of sounds, resembling less a diplomat's refined address and more a malfunctioning android. The chamber fell deadly silent, all eyes, some singular, others multiple, fixed on her in bewildered curiosity. Behind her, she heard Ambassador Sternwood's sharp intake of breath, his disappointment palpable. She could imagine his stern face, the way his brow would be furrowed in a mix of concern and irritation. Attempting to salvage the moment, Ellie smiled nervously, her voice barely a whisper. Technology, am I right?" Her attempt at humor fizzled as quickly as the translator, the cultural gap too vast for such an Earth-centered joke to land. Counselor Zyler, the insectoid representative whose rigid posture could rival the spire itself, tilted his head, his antennae twitching with irritation or confusion. Ellie couldn't tell which. "Is this some form of human jest?" His voice buzzed, the translator on his own lapel perfectly modulating his tone. No jest, Counselor," Ellie hurriedly responded, her hand reaching out in a placating gesture that she immediately regretted. On Zyler's world, she remembered too late, open palms were a challenge to combat. Senator Voss, a reptilian figure with scales that caught the light like gemstones, drew himself up. His voice was a low hiss. "We are here for diplomacy, not childish pranks." Ellie's face flushed a deeper shade of red than her diplomatic uniform. "Of course, Senator. I assure you, it was not my intention," she stammered, her voice trailing off as she realized that every word she uttered only seemed to deepen the council's growing distrust. Ambassador Sternwood stepped forward, his hand lightly touching her shoulder in a brief show of support before he addressed the council with a practiced calm. "If we may, let us briefly adjourn. Technical difficulties, as you see. We will resume shortly with the proper decorum." As the council members murmured amongst themselves, Ellie wished the spire would swallow her whole. Today was supposed to bridge galaxies, not expand the void between them. Ellie's heart hammered in her chest as the counselors filed out of the room, each step resonating like a damning verdict against her. Sternwood's terse command, "Fix this, Jenkins," left no room for error. Once the hall emptied, she seized the opportunity for redemption, thumbing through the cultural manual on her digital pad. Her next move had to be flawless. After a hurried consultation, Ellie decided on a gesture of goodwill from Earth's historical archives and offering. She retrieved a small, spherical device from her diplomatic pouch, intended as a symbol of technological sharing and unity. As the delegates reconvened, she held it aloft, a metallic orb gleaming under the spire's lights. "Esteemed members of the council," Ellie began, her voice now steadier, her translator operational. "In the spirit of cooperation and peace, I present this orb of alliance, a token of Earth's commitment to our shared future." Her eyes darted to Sternwood, seeking approval. He nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. Ellie turned the orb towards the council, its surface projecting a holographic map of trade routes and shared resources. This device contains data on Earth's technological advancements, offered freely to aid all members of this esteemed council. A murmur swept through the chamber, but it was not the murmur of acceptance Ellie had hoped for. Councillor Xylares' voice cut through the whispers, his tone as sharp as shattered glass. "Does the emissary from Earth take us for fools?" Ellie blinked, confusion clouding her expression. "I don't understand, Counselor." Senator Voss rose, his towering figure casting a shadow over Ellie. "This device resembles the scepter of Garanath," he hissed, "an instrument of war and subjugation in our history." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber, and Ellie's pulse quickened. She frantically searched her pad, her fingers trembling. There it was, under Galactic Historical Artifacts, a description matching the orb almost exactly. A tool of peace on Earth, a weapon of war elsewhere. "I assure you, this resemblance was unintended," Ellie stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She looked desperately to Sternwood, who stepped forward, his face a mask of diplomacy. "Ambassador Voss, Councillor Xyler, there has been a grave misunderstanding," Sternwood interjected, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of the moment. "The Earth delegation wishes no offense. Let us consider this an opportunity to learn from each other about our respective histories." Senator Voss's scales shimmered with a spectrum of colors, signaling his agitation. Misunderstandings seem to be a specialty of Earth's representatives today. Ellie's mind raced. Every diplomatic training session she'd attended screamed that this situation was spiraling out of control. She needed a lifeline, any lifeline. "Perhaps," Ellie ventured, her voice steadier now, "we can view this as a moment to start anew. Let us not judge by the symbols of the past, but by the actions of the present." There was a long pause. Then, surprisingly, it was Councillor Xyler who nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your words, human. We will see what actions follow." Ellie exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. There was a glimmer of hope, fragile and fleeting. As the council members murmured among themselves, considering her proposal, Ellie understood the weight of her next steps. They would either build bridges or burn them completely. Relief was a fleeting visitor for Ellie, quickly ushered out as she confronted the enormity of her next task. With the orb incident casting a long shadow, every move and word she uttered would now be scrutinized under the galaxy's most unforgiving lens. As the counselors settled back into their seats, Ellie's mind whirled with strategies to diffuse the growing distrust. Drawing a deep breath to steady herself, she declared, "If I may continue," her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Let us turn this misunderstanding into a foundation for stronger ties." Councillor Xylares' antennae twitched, signaling cautious intrigue, a small victory, but Ellie knew the hardest part was yet to come. She needed to bridge the cultural chasm with something universally appreciated. Scanning her digital pad, she found a reference to a gesture of peace used by several civilizations within the council, a ceremonial bow meant to honor the audience. "Allow me to express Earth's respect for all cultures present here today," Ellie announced, stepping away from the lectern. She bowed deeply, mimicking the illustrations on her pad, hoping her display would resonate with goodwill. However, the atmosphere in the room tightened, the temperature seemingly dropping a few degrees. Ellie straightened, scanning the room for any sign of approval, but found none. The bow, while respectful on many worlds, was apparently too casual and too shallow for the esteemed insectoids, and interpreted as servitude by others. Senator Voss's voice cut through the tension, cold as the void of space. "Such informality, is this another Earth custom? To belittle the council with subservience?" Ellie's heart sank. She had aimed for respect and landed in disdain. Sternwood stepped in with diplomatic precision that Ellie desperately envied. "Senator, please accept our sincerest apologies for any offense given. It is clear there is much Earth still needs to learn about our friends in the stars." Desperation clawed at Ellie. Her attempts at formal apologies had backfired, and the more she tried, the deeper she dug her hole. She needed a different approach, something genuine that couldn't be misinterpreted through cultural lenses. Esteemed counselors, Ellie began again, her voice tinged with a sincerity that cut through the formalities. I see now how easy it is to stumble when we are blind to the paths of others. Earth is young in this council. We are like a child among giants. But like any eager child, we are here to learn, to listen. Her words seemed to resonate, softening the hard lines of skepticism around the room. Zyler leaned back, his posture loosening slightly, a sign that her heartfelt admission was more effective than any rehearsed diplomacy. Ellie continued, perhaps, instead of more gestures that might be misread, I could listen to each of your histories. Share with me not just your customs, but your stories, and let me bring back a treasure trove of knowledge to Earth. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Curiosity peaked, replacing some of the earlier hostility. An older counselor from a race of avian-like creatures raised a feathered limb. A commendable proposal, young Earthling. We have ancient tales that could fill your digital archives many times over. Ellie smiled, grateful for the shift. I would be honored to learn from such esteemed teachers, she said. Senator Voss remained unimpressed, his gaze skeptical, but even he couldn't ignore the changing tide. We will consider your proposal, human. But be warned, Earth's place in this council hangs by a slender thread. As the session adjourned, Ellie felt the weight of her world on her shoulders lighten ever so slightly. Sternwood gave her a small, approving nod. Well done, Ms. Jenkins. Seems you found your footing at last. Walking back to her quarters, Ellie knew she had survived the day, but tomorrow's challenge loomed larger than ever. Her task was clear: absorb everything she could, bridge every gap, forge understanding from the raw ore of confusion. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could turn this precarious start into a stepping stone for Earth's future among the stars. The council reconvened under the vast, starlit dome of the Onyx Spire, the atmosphere thick with cautious anticipation. Ellie, standing slightly apart, felt every gaze upon her as though they were the distant stars themselves, cold and scrutinizing. With the previous day's missteps haunting her, she knew this was her last chance to mend Earth's fragile reputation. Esteemed counselors, Ellie began, her voice imbued with a newfound confidence, I have reflected deeply on our interactions, and in the spirit of true understanding, I wish to share a piece of Earth's heritage. She signaled to the audio technicians, a subtle nod that something different was about to unfold. The chamber dimmed as soft, haunting melodies filled the air, blending the sound of an ancient Earth instrument, the violin, with the gentle hum of an alien harp. Ellie spoke over the melody, her words rhythmic and clear. This is a piece from Earth's classical era, symbolizing peace and the beauty of life, cherished across my world. However, as the music swelled, several council members shifted uncomfortably. Whispers fluttered like disturbed moths in the dark. Ellie's heart sank as she scanned the room, her fears materializing before her eyes. Counselor Zyler's facial tendrils stiffened, an unmistakable sign of distress. The music, she realized too late, closely mirrored a lamentation melody played in the aftermath of interstellar conflicts, used by some cultures within the council to mourn their dead. Senator Voss rose, his voice slicing through the music like a blade. Does Earth mock our past tragedies? Are these not the very chords played to grieve the lost? He demanded, his translator crackling with the intensity of his tone. The music stopped abruptly, leaving a void that Ellie rushed to fill. No, Senator, she said quickly, there was no intention to evoke those painful memories. It is a misunderstanding, a terrible one. On Earth, this melody is one of hope and reflection, not grief. Ellie's plea hung in the balance as murmurs circulated the chamber. She needed to regain control, to transform this faltering into something powerful. With a steadying breath, she continued, perhaps it is a testament to how music, like all communication, can bridge worlds or widen divides. Let it not widen ours. She looked directly at the assembly, her gaze pleading for understanding. Let us instead create a new symphony together, one that speaks of unity and mutual respect. Her words seemed to resonate with a few of the younger delegates, their faces thoughtful, reflecting the dual nature of art and interpretation. One of the avian counselors, known for her wisdom, stood, her voice melodious yet commanding attention. The human is correct. Art is a prism, reflecting myriad meanings across cultures. We, too, have known misinterpretation among our own kinds. A spirited debate ensued, not about the faux pas, but about the implications of cultural artifacts and their interpretations, a discussion that Ellie had hoped for. She listened intently, her digital pad at the ready, taking notes on every detail, every cultural nuance shared. As the session drew to a close, the atmosphere had shifted from icy reproach to a cautious warmth. The council decided to establish an intercultural art exchange program, inviting Earth to participate as a gesture of goodwill and understanding. Ellie felt a mixture of relief and accomplishment as she walked from the chamber. Senator Voss approached, his expression inscrutable. "Your world treads on thin ice, Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice low. "But today you did not fall through." "Thank you, Senator," Ellie replied, realizing the gravity of his words. It was neither an endorsement nor a dismissal, a reminder of the tightrope she walked. Returning to her quarters, Ellie couldn't help but feel that Earth had just inched a little closer to its neighbors in the stars. The day's events had shown her the power of words and music, and how deeply they could touch or torment the hearts of others. She knew now that diplomacy was not just about treaties and handshakes, but about understanding the soul of every culture she engaged with. And in that understanding, perhaps, lay the true path to peace. The corridors of the Onyx Spire seemed to pulse with a newfound energy as Ellie made her way to the final session of the council. The recent turmoil had tested her, sharpened her, and as the towering doors to the council chamber slid open with a whisper, she stepped inside not just as Earth's representative, but as a potential architect of interstellar peace. Today was not about Earth, it was about every member of the Galactic Council. "Esteemed counselors," Ellie began, her voice resonating with a calm she hardly felt, "in the spirit of the new understanding we are forging, I propose a resolution for an ongoing exchange not just of art, but of ideas, customs, and histories. Let us build not just alliances, but relationships." The assembly, an array of beings from across the stars, listened intently. The earlier sessions had swayed some, hardened others, but all were now united in their curiosity to hear what Earth proposed. A galactic cultural festival, Ellie continued, the idea unfurling like a banner in the wind. A celebration where each culture showcases its uniqueness, where learning is not just an outcome, but a process we joyfully undertake together. Murmurs of approval rustled through the chamber. Counselor Zyler, his antennae gently waving, stood. "A commendable idea, human. To truly understand, we must experience not through the lens of diplomats, but through the senses of our people." Senator Voss, his earlier sternness softened by the collaborative spirit that now infused the chamber, added, "I support this motion, with a provision for mutual respect and security to be at the forefront of all activities." Ellie nodded, grateful for the contributions. "Absolutely, Senator. With respect as our foundation, I believe we can achieve greatness." The vote was called, and as each delegate cast their support, Ellie felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The resolution passed, not unanimously, but with enough consensus to move forward. It was a victory, small in the grand tapestry of the galaxy but significant for Earth's young role within this vast community. As the council adjourned, Ambassador Sternwood approached her, a rare smile playing on his usually impassive face. "Well done, Ms. Jenkins. You've turned a precarious start into a promising pathway." "Thank you, Ambassador," Ellie replied, allowing herself a moment to bask in the warmth of his praise. It was a challenge, but one I couldn't have met without the council's willingness to engage. As they left the chamber together, the buzz of conversation surrounded them. Delegates from different worlds discussed the upcoming festival with enthusiasm, their earlier reservations tempered by the prospect of celebration and understanding. Ellie paused by the great window that looked out onto the swirling galaxy. The stars seemed to twinkle a bit brighter, each one a world of possibilities. Today, she had helped nudge those possibilities into realities. Your journey is just beginning, Ellie, Sternwood said, joining her gaze out the window. Today you've sown seeds on fertile ground. But remember, diplomacy is the art of the long game. Patience and perseverance will be your best allies. Ellie nodded, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders like a mantle. I understand, Ambassador. And I'm ready for the long haul. As they turned away from the window, Ellie felt the scope of her responsibility but also the thrill of opportunity. The challenges ahead were daunting, yet the promise of building bridges between worlds exhilarated her. She was ready to step into tomorrow, to foster the growth of the seed she had planted today, and to continue weaving the intricate tapestry of interstellar diplomacy one careful thread at a time.